Welcome to the Evidence Reasons Academy. This is going to be a very technical discussion. I'm a little worn out. It's been a long day. I promised Grinch Lynchpin an abstract of the paper I'm working on. I have an atrociously worded abstract, and the paper is kind of been on the shelf for 3 years. It's disheveled. It's fragmented. It's a little bit of a jumbled mess. I've certainly talked about elements that I talk about in that paper on the internet, and I'll explain the context of the paper. I'd like to thank Grinch Lynchpin. That is his anonymous name. I will respect his anonymity. I have, for his protection, I don't know, and I don't want to know his real identity. I respect people's privacy because that's the way I'd like to be treated. And so I just want to thank Grinch Lynchpin for his interest in some of the things I say. I have been working on the problem of genetic entropy, which really does also touch on the likelihood that mutations are detrimental, which really does also relate to the complexity of proteins, which relates to their difficulty of origin and evolution. And the claim that I've been arguing a lot over is the difficulty of independent families of proteins emerging throughout time, not just at the origin of life, but also the transition from a prokaryote-like creature to a eukaryote or whatever, and then also other transitions where there are major orphan or taxonomically restricted genes, especially if they're highly novel architectures. And even if they are homologs in the domains of the proteins, that's still, I have to insist, that's still very problematic, in my opinion. So everyone's just like, I have to set the record straight. People are saying, Sal, why are you saying that all major protein families have independent origins? That's so obvious. That's not a problem for evolution. Or they'll misrepresent, that I'm claiming someone has done that. In fact, I would have some privilege to say that because Doolittle some time back had suggested something like that. He realized the potential problem it's causing if you cannot unify it. And I'm kind of aghast that people just think it's not a problem for evolution. Even if we accept common descent is not the issue. The issue is, even if we assume common descent, you need miracles along the way to make this feasible. And how this relates to the paper is if we have a frame shift, that is kind of a picture of what happens when you start from a random string, an arbitrary random string. Can you get a functional protein? And people say, well, selection can guide it. And I'm just like, where's the probability calculation for that? You might be able to find examples of an isolated protein where you get something functional, quote unquote. But there's a problem with cherry picking. Can that be a general law for all proteins, particularly novel multimeric proteins, and not just multimeric proteins, but proteins that are part of complexes, and also systems, complexes that are parts of systems. So that's basically what I was laying out. Specifically, Grinch Lynchpin was interested in, I was reading paragraphs about collagen. He asked, okay, let's assume that we had a miracle for the prokaryote eukaryote transition and presumably the origin of life. Are you saying it's going to be problematic after that point? And there are two proteins that came to mind immediately that happened to be included in a paper I was working on. Again, this one that I linked to in the video description. So if you go to the video description, you will see a link that hopefully will get you a public domain access to a very rough jumbled draft of some of my thoughts. I'm the lead author on this, but I have 3 co-authors whose names have been redacted so far. We don't know what we're going to do with this paper. I mean, it has a lot of elements that could be useful. I don't know, even though I think scientifically this is legitimate, I seriously doubt an evolutionary biology journal will publish on the difficulty or problems with the entire discipline, which unfortunately I think this is highlighting problems with the entire discipline regarding the problem of complexity. But in any case, we put our thoughts together, and we could cite experimental evidence, and some of this I think is a little bit trivial. I mean, I think it should be so blatantly obvious that there's going to be problems just evolving proteins de novo of certain levels of complexity. Sure, we can make just random polypeptides that might have some catalytic ability or it might have some utility immediately to a cell, but for integrated function, this is going to be difficult. So the link to, hopefully, let me know if there's a problem with the link. So the link to the draft, and I emphasize draft outline. This isn't anywhere near the state of the paper that should be prepared for submission. We'll see. I mean, it's a massive paper because we're trying to go into great detail about a lot of things, and that's where you actually get the problems. So with the evolution of major protein families. So that's basically the paper. Let me review some of the sections, and some parts are more well characterized than others. I want to say that the question of why most mutations are neutral at best to detrimental, you could kind of see it here as you study. So let me just show, I mean, you've heard me talk about topoisomerase before. I go into great detail of the importance of the variety of amino acids. I highlight some of the important residues that are critical. You knock those out, it starts to compromise function. The different looks and parts of the topoisomerase that are critical components, critical motifs and domains. The location of post-translational modifications. There will be a section on the insulin receptor that hasn't yet been incorporated. I talk about the zinc fingers proteins, and I'm kind of appalled. I interacted with a couple of evolutionary biologists. They said, well, look, all of the zinc finger domains are homologous. I'm just like, guys, do you ever calculate the feasibility? Because as you modify these supposed homologous regions or duplicate them, the zinc finger is going to bind to physically possibly very different locations on the genome. So instead of a promoter site, it's just going to grab some random piece. It's not like it gets physically closer the more that you get closer in sequence. That's not how it works. This is like taking digits of a zip code, and you're saying, well, you get, you have a 5-digit zip code and you get 4 of the digits right. Does that mean you're getting geographically close? Absolutely not. Or you're delivering it. So I cover the zinc finger protein, introduce it. I talk about the collagen. I mean, just look at this collagen protein. I highlight the locations of very critical post-translational modifications, domains that that are cleaved off in the processing. I mean, this is just like so non-trivial for this to function. And so the zinc finger has appeared mostly in mammalian, that particular, the eukaryotic zinc finger. I think it's appeared in metazoan, something like that. An evolutionary biologist in that field of specialty might know. The collagens have been said to emerge in metazoans, the ones with embryos. It's only found in there, or mostly represented in there. And I show the difficulty of evolving this in a human lineage with reference to a frameshift. So, rather, the paper itself deals with a hypothesis put forward by Bartonek, and it was shown in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, approved by Eugene Koonin, through Eugene Koonin. And I'm just like, how did that get through peer review? They're saying that that PNAS paper said a frame shift will preserve key hydrophobicity and you'll be able to keep evolving. And I'm just like, no. First, you're going to get tons of stop codons. Notwithstanding that Dr. Joel said there's sometimes avenues to remediate that, but you can't guarantee. You need complexity to be able to correct, replace stop codons that, so you can get a longer one. But you get stop codons. For a multimeric protein, you're going to blow away all the interface points. Like topoisomerase has 60 interface points to create dimerization. I mean, did these guys even do an experiment to see what happens to a multimeric protein? And I talked to some advocate of this frame shifting hypothesis. I threw out immediately these multimeric proteins, and he was just like, oh no, this doesn't cover that. I'm just like, well, okay, so it's not, that's something you need, I think, just like you need to point out the obvious. You're going to blow away all your protein, any protein that has tons of post-translational modifications, that's blown out of the water. I mean, like, do you have like anything left except just really trivial small polypeptides? I mean, come on. How is this a big discovery for evolution? It doesn't solve any major problems. And I can't believe this past peer review, they had co-authors. And this is a Proceedings of the National Academy of Science paper. So I felt obligated to go after it and just to kind of point out the obvious with textbook proteins. You can't do this stuff. They went into all these abstractions. It's like, could you at least try to apply your hypothesis to something of even moderate complexity? So that's what the paper itself was about. It was a counter. It was a criticism of a PNAS paper, and good luck with us getting that through peer review, even though I and the co-authors are just almost practically laughing that PNAS paper got through peer reviewed and was approved by no one less than Eugene Koonin. I mean, I expect better quality from him. We did write him, and he didn't even give us the courtesy of a response. I mean, I was a student of one of his staff members, so I guess that didn't give me any leverage. So that's kind of an outline of the paper itself. But if you take that paper and you say, okay, obviously frameshift won't make something like a human protein. Just you can extend that to just conceive of a protein of that complexity when it first emerged. Maybe not the full out complexity, but even a working collagen needs to have huge numbers of post-translational modifications to be able to give it its shape. That's just simple biophysics. There's no collagen without post-translational modifications. It's about approximately every 10 residues. So, in the collagen domain of the collagen. So that'd be about 80 properly positioned post-translational modifications. Not only that, it's usually a heterotrimer after all that. I mean, this is just like non-trivial, and you need other enzymes to be able to implement it. Just like the first enzyme is one that's going to be able to affix post-translational modifications. One could think evolutionary hypotheses, but I've found that when I've interacted with some of them, they'll think they can just come up with some speculation, and that somehow solves the problem. And then sometimes when the speculation is subject to deeper scrutiny, it has issues with probability calculations. So that's mostly it. Hopefully that will that'll at least give the data points that I found very disconcerting. Regarding collagen and thinking it can evolve easily, I continue to be appalled how easily some of my opponents will postulate it is to evolve something. And I'm just like, there's not anything in theory that says that this should evolve, and there's certainly not any experiment that is actually relevant that shows that this will evolve very easily. To demonstrate that it evolves easily, one has to have a plausible starting initial state where the system didn't exist. You can throw in even what you suspect are the precursor co-opted parts to the system. And then run an experiment, but I just don't see it happening. Certainly with topoisomerase, what are you going to do? I mean, the creature could be dead. Now, granted, that's probably earlier. If we assume the mainstream timeline, that would be earlier in the evolution, or maybe even the origin of life. So that's about all I had in this 20-minute talk. Thank you, anyone who's interested. I'm sending a link to Dr. Joel and Dr. Dan that I'm doing this because their names are on here. I'm not offended at all if you're not at all interested in this, and please don't go through the whole paper in its current messy state. But I'm putting it out there because this is part of an ongoing discussion I'm having with Grinch Lynchpin, and maybe somehow I could salvage this paper for later use. So with that, I know it's just really late. If I look worn out, it's because I am. And I thank you all for for your time. So I'm just going to close out with some, let's see some, if I have any music I can play. I'll just do my usual rock on and off. Take care. God bless you all, and thank you all for watching. Have a good evening.